Greetings. I'm your host, Glen Alex, and this is The Glen Alex Show, the 2023 Positive Change Podcast Award winner for psychology and health and wellness. And each episode of The Glen Alex Show focuses on a different aspect of health because you are whole and all of you matter. And I am on a mission to help you be joyful, connected, confident, and complete the life experience I call wealth, WELLTH, which is health plus other riches. And keep in mind that those living in total health or even in pursuit of it, those who are balanced physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, do not intentionally harm self or others. So please join us on this journey so we can make humanity and the world safe, loving, and accepting of everyone. Please visit glenalex.com to learn more about me and my work. And stay tuned for this very impactful episode on flipping your script.
Welcome to the Glen Alex Show, where your health matters, set your mind, let it flow. Joyful, connected, confident, complete. Let Glen Alex help you back on your feet. The Glen Alex
Please help me welcome my guest, Albert Bramante. Dr. Bramante is a true triple threat when it comes to empowering performers to overcome psychological roadblocks and achieve success. As a veteran talent agent with over 20 years of securing major roles for actors, he has unparalleled insights into the entertainment industry's challenges. However, Bramante's real superpower is his unique fusion of this experience with a PhD in psychology and certifications in hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming. This rare combination allows him to provide your audience with a credible expert perspective on the mindset and psychology of peak performance and has provided proven psychological strategies to help performers break through self-doubt, imposter syndrome, fear of success, and self-sabotaging patterns. Dr. Bramante, welcome to the Glen Alex Show.
Thank you so much, Glenn, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh my goodness. I am happy you are able to be here, have made time for this, because I think your work is completely applicable to everyday people who struggle with these very same issues. So let's start with what led you to this work?
It started with my work with actors in a sense. So I work as an agent, so I represent actors, and this is a field that has a lot of competition. So there's so many opportunities, but for to develop self-doubt, unfortunately, because due to the high competitive nature of this work. So I often find myself, in addition to obviously providing career advice, but also doing some unofficial mindset coaching in a sense to a lot of these actors over the time.
Okay. Well, what led you into um, psychology, this aspect of psychology in particular?
I was always the inquisitive child. I love to read. I love to question things. I love to have a critical mind, scientific mind. So books were like my sanctuary growing up, as well as academics. And I've always been interested in the human mind, so to speak. So while I was training for psychology, I started working with actors, as a talent agent. And I was noticing roadblocks that I kept coming up against with actors where they were telling me, one hand, consciously they wanted to find work, they were hungry for work, but yet their actions were telling me another story. Their actions were self-sabotaging.
Okay.
And that's what led me to down the road to doing my doctoral thesis on actors and self-sabotage, which then later became the driving force for my book.
Okay, okay, excellent, excellent. Now, were there any particular themes or categories of the roadblocks you encountered?
The main theme is, you could say imposter syndrome, fear of success, fear of failure, that was coming up. It's just sometimes the fear of putting yourself out there and dealing with failure is probably the biggest threat or roadblock that I found. That was the biggest theme coming up, especially with actors, because there's so many times that they're getting their word, they're being told no, they're being, turned away for roles or turned down for roles. And that over time can wear down their self-esteem, their psyche.
Okay. How do you recommend they handle the frequent rejections?
The first one is mindset shift, which is not taking it personal
Okay.
and looking at it from purely business perspective. And I always like to use the phrase, there's no such thing as rejection, just a simple reminder that your services are not needed today.
Okay. I like that.
So,
Wow, that's a pretty powerful reframe.
and I think, well, that's extremely important, reframe over time. And that's one way to take the personal aspect out of it,
Okay.
which I feel will be a major help, or at least a driving force to alleviate a lot of that stress.
Okay. Okay. And so what other reframes do you have for your clients, actors who are self-sabotaging or fear that they're being frauds with their accomplishments or are afraid of succeeding?
Well, the one thing, the fear of succeeding also is a close cousin of fear of failure.
Hmm.
So, what another reframe is there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So, if you look at the opportunities that you might not have landed or the mistakes you made, look at them as stepping stones to your success. And there's only one way to go up, and that's up. There's only one way, and that's one way of looking at things. Another powerful reframe is how you identify yourself, your identity. And as an artist, there seems to be a romanticized version of the starving artist mentality.
Okay.
And I think that's a misnomer, so to speak. I think that that's a mistake to look at yourself as a starving artist, but rather I'm a professional working actor.
Okay. Can you say a little more about that starving artist narrative?
Sure. So one of the things I've studied is hypnosis and NLP, and that it really looks at the power of language and how language creates the reality of the world we're in. So if you use the reality of a starving artist, that means struggle, that means hardships, that means poverty mindset. And so then your subconscious mind is going to create a reality of that. So, well, okay, you say I'm a starving artist, so I must avoid anything that's not going to make me a starving artist.
Okay. Okay. So you're working with them also to just rewrite their narrative?
Yes. Rewrite their
Okay.
identity
Okay.
in the sense of story.
Okay. Okay. And that's your book is based on that Rise Above the Script, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And help
Okay.
them rework their story, rework their
Okay.
script. And that's what I mean by the script is not necessarily a movie script, so to speak, or a play script. I'm referring to the script in your mind that you use.
Okay. That mindset that they bring to every
Yes.
day. Okay. Okay. Now, how does individual personality play into these roadblocks?
So one of the models that I use and I'm a big fan of is the Big Five or the five factor model of personality. So
Okay.
just so nutshell, it's researchers in the 80s had condensed all of the thousands and hundreds of personality traits into five major ones,
Okay.
and that we all share. And that's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay.
And so all of us have, a combination of these five and varying degrees. So the first one is openness, and to cultivate that is to have an open mind, trying out new things. I think that is extremely important for anybody, not just artists, but to be open to new experiences.
Okay.
And then the next step is conscientiousness, which is all about discipline, focus, and dedication to your craft or to your work. And that's the biggest success factor. And research has backed up to thousands of studies have backed up that conscientiousness is the biggest predictor of life success.
Okay.
And then you have extroversion. Now, I'm not talking about being life at a party, because I'm sure a lot of listeners may not be, want to have that desire to be the life of the party, but there still has to be the ability to connect to other people and to make connections. And the only way you're going to do that is by actually talking to people. So having a slight degree of extroversion is important.
Okay.
And then agreeableness is how well are you able to be coachable. And that's another element for success for actors, because you have to be open to feedback. You have to be open to coaching. Because that's otherwise, if you're closed down from that, you're going to be self-sabotaging yourself and
Okay.
opportunities for growth. And then finally is neuroticism, which sounds a little harsher than what it is, but that refers to a person's reactivity to stress. So like somebody would be high neuroticism would get anxious very easily, depressed very easily,
Mm-hmm.
whereas those that are lower on it would be more resilient.
Okay.
Now, in a nutshell, the biggest finding that I found from my research is that the actors that are high in neuroticism combined with low in conscientiousness is going to be the most prime for self-sabotage.
Okay.
So that's kind of like how I use, that model of personality.
Okay. Okay. So can you give us an example of how you work with a client who is low on conscientiousness and high on neuroticism and their
Well,
self-sabotage?
that's a good question. So if you up your conscientiousness by, you know, putting things down on paper, creating action, putting things on a calendar and taking, action, a planner is really important. So when you start documenting, taking responsibility for your career, you're going to be more in control. And what leads people higher in neuroticism usually is a lack of control in their lives. So if you can establish that control
Okay.
and how much control you have, that is going to be what's going to be major success.
Okay. Okay. That makes complete sense. And it brings to mind a client who just uh, berates himself for not remembering. And
Mm-hmm.
I asked, well, what systems do you have set up to remind you of appointments and schedules? And well,
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to remember, is the response. What would you say to him?
I would say that would be nice, but the mind doesn't work that way. Our mind can only receive, without sufficient rehearsal or documentation, our brain can only really maintain at one time 5 or 7 pieces of information before
Okay.
it goes out of our memory. So that's why it's important to write things down. That's why you have appointment books. That's why you have, when you go to the doctor, they give you the appointment card.
Yes.
And that's why they call you the day before to confirm. So reminders. So that's important. And now we have phones. Put everything on your phone, the calendar on your phone. Set reminders up
Exactly. And
for
it's
things.
not failure, it's not your weakness because you need that.
Yeah, it's a necessity. It's not a weakness at all.
Okay. Okay. So, um, in today's political climate, what do what do you have to say about the level of openness of the general public?
It definitely varies. Usually, and I don't, I'm not one much for politics, but I will say that usually the more, I guess maybe progressive liberal you are, the more open minded you are. Whereas generally conservatives tend to be low on the open-mindedness scale. Sometimes, I'm not trying to generalize, but usually overall,
Right.
that's a
Right.
trend. So it varies from person to, and there's different levels of conservatism. You have those that are, values conservative, financially conservative, or politically conservative. And they can be all different things
Right.
and different
Right.
names.
Right. Well, I appreciate you answering the question because I usually don't talk politics either. Um, I just find that on all on the ends of both both ends of the spectrum that there's a level of closeness that my way is the way that I think is a problem for
Ye-
society and the world.
Absolutely. It's that one narrow, one size fits all, which doesn't work, and
Yeah.
that's not effective. And I think the important thing is to take the road of we can agree to disagree
Yes.
model rather than, my way is better than the other. Because again, we've seen this on both sides where it's like, it's either my way or, everybody else is misinformed. Yeah, and so we can agree to disagree. And there's people who disagree with some of the stuff I say, which I think is a great conversation tool starter. It's like,
Ye-
let's talk.
ye- Yes, if it leads to conversation and dialogue.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, how do you get an actor who is closed in how they interpret a role or portray a role and become more coachable?
Well, I think learning the fact that part of being a human being is that you never stop learning, and being successful is you never stop learning.
Okay.
The, a lot of the A-list actors that that are even household names have coaches, or sometimes, well, not necessarily, maybe not in an official sense, but they work with other actors to practice and
Okay.
rehearse
Okay.
their lines. I can tell you that, one of the insiders, the one of the shows that's been successful over the years is Sopranos. And the main star, James Gandolfini, had a coach on set, that would work with his dialect and work with his, and then
Okay.
pronunciation and all that. So that, being coachable is actually a skill for success, and being open to that. It's not a sign that you're weak. It's actually a sign of strength because you can always learn. There's always an opportunity to learn something new.
This is so relatable because my highly anxious clients uh, are upset and angry because they don't know everything and they think they should. And with that mindset, there is no room for learning or growth.
It's
So
unfortunate, but true.
it's very unfortunate. So how would you approach that?
I mean, the only thing, and I think sometimes as helpers and as therapists, sometimes the hardest things that we have to face is that not everybody is ready to be helped or ready to be coachable. And
True.
there's nothing we can do. We can be the most effective therapists out there, but there's one thing we cannot influence, and that's free will.
Mhm.
So what I would say is you open yourself and say, hey, I'm open, I'm here, but you kind of remind, you could take models of success, and that's what any profession they're in. Now, I work with actors, so I'll use examples of A-list actors, but it could be, people that are successful salespeople, or people successful educators or coaches or speakers, and how they often will go for coaching.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's actually a sign of strength.
To be open to learning.
Yes.
It's so simple. So simple. Now, I read through your book, which I think is awesome,
Thank you.
and I highly recommend it for anyone to read because it is applicable to everyday people because we are acting out certain scripts and narratives. In the book, you do a great job of differentiating self-worth, self-esteem, and self-confidence. Can you just run through those for us?
Sure. They're highly related. Now, A lot of times self-confidence is domain specific in a specific area, where self-esteem is more global.
Okay.
Uh, so, for example, I'm very good in, I have a good, strong self-concept and self-understanding and appreciation in academics because I'm very good at that. I'm not so good in athletics. I'm not so good in music, but
Okay.
that's not going to affect who I am because that's not my focus of my life. But your self-esteem is your kind of like your global overall opinion of yourself.
Okay.
And your self-concept could sometimes be just how you understand yourself, which can sometimes be neutral. But your self-esteem is more of thing. And even self-domain and self-identity, again, is domain specific.
Okay. And what about self-worth?
Self-worth is kind of like, I think it's very related to self-esteem
Okay.
in a sense. That your self-worth is how you view yourself from, as an overall thing. And I would say they're very distant, very almost used interchangeably, your self-esteem and your self-worth.
Okay. Okay. I was there's a part in the book where you describe self-worth as a deep knowing of your inherent worth as a human being, which
Yes,
is not subjected to external forces.
right. And that's part of, even with your self-esteem should not be externalized by external sources. Your self-esteem comes from within. Now it can be, influenced, and it can, your external sources, with people who build you up and your achievements will build your self-worth and your self-esteem up.
Okay.
However, if you adopt that mentality of I'm not going to be influenced by external sources, you're not going to be phased by, by getting a negative review, or getting, a harsh criticism or somebody belittling you. That's
Okay.
going to be water off your back in a sense,
Okay.
um, because you know who you are, you know what you can do,
Right.
um, and a lot of times we get harsh reviews, or what we call sometimes on the internet as trolls, that really don't know who we are. So it's their comments are meaningless. Their harsh critique and criticism, and sometimes they're venting their own insecurities out.
Right. Right. Okay. So what do you is there one of those, the self-confidence or self-esteem or self-worth, that you work more with in getting actors to rise above the script?
I would say self-worth is probably the biggest thing, and that comes with your identity too, and really cultivating your identity, and even your mindset, because
Okay.
you should know as an actor that you're worthy of having a shot at the table. You're worthy of success.
Okay.
And when you have that mentality, that's when I feel you're going to be more able to embrace the coaching and embrace even the helpful feedback that you get, that might not be telling you that your choices are wonderful all the time as an actor. So it'll help you grow. You open more to that feedback that you need.
Okay. Okay. So no matter how many accolades or positive reviews or juicy roles an actor gets, if their self-worth is low, they're still going to have these roadblocks.
Of course, because then, and I've seen this sometimes where they'll downplay it. It's like, well, yeah, I got the role, but I think they just gave it to me to be nice. Or, I'll hear that, or I'll hear, I got the role, but, it really wasn't that hard. There wasn't that many actors trying out. And
Okay.
I have to stop that and say, no, you got the role. And,
Period.
and the same thing goes with any profession. It's like sometimes they'll downplay. I got this reward, but in the media, they were just being nice. No,
Okay.
and reframe that. No, you got a reward because you deserve it.
Okay. Okay. Um, so what are your top tips for helping actors rise above the script and get over themselves, basically.
So one thing is, using the reframes that I've looked at, that I kind of mentioned about the rejection as your services are not needed rather than taking it personally.
Hmm.
And also there's no, incorporating failure as feedback. So that's the basic. Other techniques I would say is do something that makes you a little uncomfortable every day. Step outside your
Okay.
comfort zone. Stretch it a little bit. I'm not talking about doing something outrageous at first, but stretch it a little bit. Do
Okay.
something, that you wouldn't normally do. Change your routine up a bit. Um, Also, I mentioned in my book the concept of the happy file, which is you document all of your accolades. So whether that, and they can be very simple accolades, such as positive feedback from a casting director, a good review, or an audience, feedback, something that the audience tells you, you did a
Okay.
wonderful job, or your performance moved me,
Okay.
in a sense. When you can start taking that and you document it. When I talk about happy file, I'm kind of old school. I talk about actually keeping a journal. I'm not talking about doing it online, but keeping an actual physical journal and
Handwritten.
documenting all, handwritten.
Handwritten.
And
And what's the benefit of handwritten versus typed?
because there's something about when you write it, you're using your motor skills, and it's
Mhm.
more of a kinesthetic tactile sensation. So it's more about rewiring it to the brain. And it boils down to, even when we talk about like study techniques for like students, a lot of times you're writing your notes because there's an actual, when you do the hand motor
Mhm.
pathway into your brain, you're solidifying it more. So it's also just a way to rewire,
Okay.
your brain.
Okay. Okay. So let me just summarize because those tips they sound simple and they're relatively easy to implement. I just want the audience to understand that
Mhm.
change and growth, it doesn't have to be a painful, traumatic process. So simple reframing, stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit at a time, which sounds to me like it'll create more openness, and keep a happy file. Document what you do well in your accolades. That combination, those tips together, I can't imagine that they wouldn't positively impact anxiety and depression and these self-sabotaging behaviors we engage in. So thank you for that. That was pretty good.
Thank you.
That's pretty good. Now, in your book, you also mention mindfulness and physical activity. What roles do they play in self-worth, flipping the script?
Sure. Well, I'll start with mindfulness, and that's just by keeping yourself aware of these thoughts, because we have, there's estimated that we have, thousands of thoughts that enter our brains daily, and they're just thoughts. They should just come and go, and then be aware of that. So, like, when you find yourself having that self doubt, or that thought comes in from maybe something you're when you were younger, some constructive or negative feedback, let it go and say, okay, it's just a thought. And so you don't let these thoughts, stay in there longer than they should.
Okay.
So that's why being mindful, being aware of the process that's going on in your brain and mind, and paying attention to that. And then flipping it,
Okay.
like, okay. And physical activity, I think it's just good sometime. And I'm not talking about extreme, it doesn't have to be extreme. Walking is great. I've noticed, and research has backed this up, when you're walking and you're listening to something, you tend to retain it a little bit more because you're, using movement.
Okay.
So sometimes, again, just taking a walk, outdoors, or taking a, 10-minute stroll daily, even if, incorporating that. And just even using it to refocus your thoughts and collect your thoughts can be helpful.
Okay. Okay. Are you listening?
Mhm.
Thank you so much for that. Uh, so as far as just the lay people, regular folk, what words of wisdom or insights do you have for them in taking on um, rewriting their own story?
Start with small things. That's the first thing. Rome was, built in a day.
Okay.
And, to even use the proverb, the journey with 10,000 steps starts with one.
Hmm. Okay.
So start small, do something new every day, something tiny, take action. And that's one thing that, really is helpful is taking action and not just thoughts or ideas. This is why I don't really like to-do lists because they're just lists, but take actions. So take one item. If you do have that list, take one item and say, let's do it today and put it on your calendar.
Okay. Dr. Bramante, you are preaching to the choir. Oh my gosh, when I got my hands on your book and I started reading through it, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. So
Thank
it
you.
it is going on my list of resources. So thank you. Thank you so much. And I know we had talked about doing a case study. I guess we could still do that.
Sure.
We came up with some examples, so I thought maybe that might be enough. But let me just share this with you and whatever thoughts you have. Single mother, 39, divorced, has three teenage kids. She grew up in a very strict household, was always told what to do. And so one of the things she said to me was she can't handle freedom. When she has the freedom of choice, then she usually chooses wrong. And she tends to give in when she's criticized for doing what she thinks is right, like having her teenage kids leave their room doors open when they have company, or having her kids do chores around the house, appropriate chores around the house. So she gives into that and she's second guessing herself all the time, highly anxious about doing the wrong thing. What are your
Well,
thoughts?
I would say the first thing for her to do is the fact that she's raising three teens on her own is kudos. That's great. Um, and the fact that she even has these standards and rules, even better yet,
Yes.
to provide structure. So what I would say is like, kind of reframe the notion of being a parent. A lot of times with being a parent, sometimes parents think, especially single parents, I must be my child's friend. And that's not true. That's not your role as a parent. So I would kind of coach her, maybe and suggest for her not to worry about the disapproval because that's temporary, that's fleeting. It's gonna be
Okay.
fleeting and temporary. And maybe even reflect back to how when she was growing up, how there were times where she felt that she disapproved what her parents say, but that didn't stop her love for them. And that's not
Right.
gonna stop their love for her.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I would say stick to her guns, her rules. It's her household, and if they're living under there, assuming rent free, which means it's her house. So
Right.
I would kind of work with her on that, establishing her on her identity, and just like this is your house, your rules, and if you don't want to have doors closed, that's a rule. That
Okay.
you should be comfortable in saying, and there's going to be temporary times where they may pout their stomp their feet or pout or talk under their breath, and that I shouldn't be taken personally. That's just part of being a teenager.
Okay. Okay. So rewriting her story would be from being this child from an overbearing environment to I'm the parent. Now I'm
Hmm.
responsible for making appropriate decisions.
Yeah, and
Okay.
now
Okay.
you don't have to be overbearing yourself, but at the
Right.
same time, you don't you shouldn't because a lot of mistakes parents make is they're either too overbearing or they're too lenient.
Hmm.
So find that middle ground where you're not necessarily overbearing. let them sometimes make their own choices, but at the same time, it's your house, your rules,
Okay.
and your boundaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Okay. Very cool. Thank you so much. I really I love the way you language, and you mentioned language early on, how you language your principles, your concepts, so people can understand them. They're readily digestible, and I really appreciate that. So thank you. Now, as we wrap up, um, how can anyone reach out to you if they have any questions about your work? Or do you have any products or services that you offer to the general public?
Sure. My website's under construction, but the products I offer on my website, albertbramante.com, is I have hypnosis recordings for all different things, different aspects. So
Okay.
they're not long. They're like 15 to 17-minute recordings, and they're quick. And there's so many things about athletic performance, anxiety reduction, sleep enhancement, stop smoking, any other
Okay.
type of addiction. And you can just go to my website to get those. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn and Instagram. LinkedIn, I'm just under my name, Albert Bramante, and Instagram, I'm under Dr. Albert Bramante. And also, feel free to get my book. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook.
Okay. And where are the hard copies available?
Amazon.
Amazon. Okay. Okay. So go get Rise Above the Script so you can start flipping your script. Dr. Bramante, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I truly appreciate you being here, and I'm excited for the audience learning from you.
And thank you, Glenn, for inviting me. It's such a great honor to be here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Glenn Alex Show. We really hope that you learn that you are the author of your own story and you will take steps to now flip the script so you can live as healthy and as authentic life as possible. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode.
Refresh your spirit with a nourishing thought.
Please allow me to leave you with this nourishing thought. When writing the story of your life, don't let anyone else hold the pen. Now, the author of that quote has been attributed to different people, so I'm just going to say it's unknown. You know, we all have scripts and roles assigned to us by others, typically the people who we depended on for food, shelter, safety, and love. So we unwittingly accepted their narrative for us, which was based upon their needs, desires, and wounds. What's the story of your life? Are you the one who takes care of others first? Are you the peacemaker who gives in all the time? Or are you the strong one who doesn't need help? Now, while the traits of the imposed narratives can be positive, they can also be roadblocks to your best self. Taking care of others is not noble when it results in self neglect. Ignoring your needs just to avoid disagreements isn't peaceful. And not asking for or accepting help when necessary is not strength. Your mental health and overall well being require you to flip the script you're acting out. Start with art, ART. Acknowledge the stories that you repeat to yourself, like, it's bad for me to rest. He'll be mad if I speak up, or I should be able to do it myself. Reflect on these fallacies to see the negative impact they have on you and how they keep you stuck, anxious, or depressed. Then transcend your narrative and rewrite your own story. Assistance from a professional therapist or life coach can help you unpack your story, process your wounds, then become the author of your own life by flipping the script. To learn more about your story and total health, visit glenalex.com Order your copy of my 3-time award-winning book, Living in Total Health. Order your copy of the Amazon bestseller, Wellness Through Words. That includes my chapter, Living Well with Boundaries. And then book your free consultation with me. Then tune in to the next episode of The Glen Alex Show. And until next time, be well.